Welcome to our breakdown of A Real Pain, 2024. A Real Pain follows the journey of two cousins, David and Benji, who travel to Poland to honor their recently deceased grandmother. David, a family man working in New York, contrasts sharply with his cousin Benji, who is jobless and struggling with his emotions. Together, they visit their grandmother's homeland, reflecting on their Jewish heritage and the painful history of their ancestors. Throughout their journey, they encounter the lasting effects of the Holocaust, each processing their experiences differently. David and Benji's dynamic. From the very start, the contrast between David and Benji is clear. David is the organized, responsible adult, while Benji is carefree and spontaneous, even reckless. David is concerned about Benji's emotional state after their grandmother's passing and arranges the trip to check on him. Benji, on the other hand, seems eager to reconnect with David, feeling abandoned in his adult life. Throughout the tour, Benji's erratic behavior stands out. He bonds with strangers on the tour, like Marcia, while David remains distant. Benji brings marijuana into Poland, an act that makes David uncomfortable and anxious. The film uses these differences to illustrate the complex nature of grief and emotional pain. David tries to be calm and composed, while Benji wears his heart on his sleeve. The tour and its emotional weight. As the cousins move through Poland, visiting Holocaust sites like the Majdanek concentration camp, the emotional weight of their Jewish heritage becomes evident. Benji struggles to cope with the horrors of the past, becoming overwhelmed and emotional. He often rejects the dry, factual approach of the tour guide, James, in favor of a more emotional and personal connection to the history they are witnessing. David, however, remains reserved, struggling to process the grief he feels and questions whether he should express it. The tour becomes a metaphor for their relationship, with David trying to stay composed while Benji is consumed by emotion. They both carry the weight of their ancestors' pain, but they deal with it in drastically different ways. Benji's raw, unfiltered grief contrasts with David's more subdued reaction. The film doesn't judge either approach, but instead invites the viewer to reflect on the different ways people cope with loss and trauma. David's role in the journey. David's motivations for taking this trip are complicated. On the one hand, he wants to check in on Benji's mental health after their grandmother's death. On the other hand, there's an underlying desire for David to reconnect with something he feels he has lost, a sense of spontaneity and emotional freedom that Benji still seems to possess. The piano scene is a key moment in this realization. David recalls how he and Benji once shared a love for the piano, but as they've grown older, David has let go of this part of his identity. In contrast, Benji still clings to it, perhaps as a way to hold on to the person he once was. A painful reunion. At dinner with the tour group, David opens up about Benji's struggles, mentioning his previous suicide attempt. This moment is significant because it shows David's acknowledgement of his cousin's pain, something he has trouble articulating. Benji, on the other hand, remains emotionally raw, unable to suppress his feelings. The film highlights the tension between the two cousins as they navigate their different ways of processing grief and pain. The meaning of pain and grief. Throughout A Real Pain, the film explores the nature of grief. For David, it's about suppressing pain, carrying on with life, and embracing responsibility. For Benji, grief is something that can't be easily put aside. It demands to be felt and expressed. The film doesn't give us a clear answer about which approach is better. Instead, it shows us the complexity of emotional pain and how it can manifest in different ways. The movie also delves into the concept of identity. David and Benji, though from the same Jewish heritage, have grown up in America and see themselves as Americans. When they visit their grandmother's old house in Poland, they're reminded that they no longer belong to the land their ancestors came from. Their identity, shaped by their American lives, feels disconnected from their past. This idea of identity being fluid and constantly evolving is a key theme in the film, as the cousins realize that they are no longer fully connected to the place of their origins. The climax. The climax of the film comes when Benji and David visit their grandmother's old house. Here, they follow Jewish tradition by placing stones on the porch to honor the deceased. However, their gesture is met with hostility from a local neighbor who asks them to remove the stones. This moment encapsulates the feeling of being an outsider, of being disconnected from the very land where their ancestors once lived. The painful irony is that, despite their efforts to honor their heritage, they are still outsiders in their own ancestral home. The film's ending is open to interpretation. After their trip, David and Benji return to New York. David invites Benji to stay with him and his family, but Benji opts to stay at the airport, staring into the unknown. In a tense moment, David slaps Benji, echoing the way their grandmother once slapped him. This act, though jarring, may be David's way of trying to fill the emotional void left by their grandmother. It's a painful, awkward moment of connection between the two cousins. They share a brief, tight hug, but the unspoken tension lingers. In the final scene, David returns home to his family, placing a stone in front of his building as a tribute to his grandmother. However, Benji remains at the airport, lost in his own thoughts. The ambiguity of this ending highlights Benji's ongoing struggle with his identity and grief. He's unable to find closure, and it's unclear what his next step will be. The film's final message, A Real Pain, is a film about contradictions. It's about two cousins who, despite their differences, are bound by shared history and family. It's about the different ways people process grief and how we all carry the scars of our past. The film doesn't offer easy answers, but instead challenges us to think about the nature of pain, identity, and what it means to truly heal. By leaving the ending unresolved, the film forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that life doesn't always give us closure. Some wounds remain open, and some people, like Benji, are still searching for meaning and purpose. In conclusion, A Real Pain is a thoughtful exploration of family, identity, and the human condition. It invites us to reflect on how we deal with emotional pain and the ways in which we connect with others. The ending, with its quiet melancholy, leaves us with more questions than answers, but that's what makes it so powerful. It's a film that sticks with you long after the credits roll.